Welcome back to Too Much Future, the show where we play through the Fallout games and then we talk about them. We're playing New Vegas right now. We're getting towards the end. I, of course, am Cameron, and with me as always is Michael.
Yeehaw!
Oh, hold on.
What?
Behold, am I speakingeth to Michael, or am I speaking to Cowboy Michael?
This is just regular Michael. I've never heard of this cowboy Michael of whom you speak.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
You just said yeehaw.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
I mean, I was
got me
just doing
thinking.
that, as part of the ambiance of New Vegas. I mean, that would be bizarre. Someone turning into a different version of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, occasionally, I'll just say like, home on the range or whatever, and some other guy.
I usually
shows
say
up.
that when I see some deer or antelope playing.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's a big part of it. You would never think about being home on the range if not for the deer and or antelope playing. Like we all know that. Michael, what'd we do in this episode?
Last time we told you we were going to do a little bit of side quest cleanup, which is also that's definitely what we're doing. But then it turned out the next quest that I had scheduled for its own episode, which I did remember as a quest, is not as really involved as I thought it was, or as I sort of maybe recalled it potentially being. And so we're going to be doing some side quests, and then we're going to be at the end of this episode pivoting back to the main quest to do a very short and strange main quest mission.
Yes, I will say that in a general sense, what we did for this episode, or for the next couple episodes, pretty odd. New Vegas completes in an odd way, maybe is the best way of putting it. Also, what a euphemism, by the
way. Which one is the euphemism?
I don't know. Just if you're going around in the world saying things complete in odd ways, you know, that's a little one for everyone to take home with them if they want. Use that out in the world. When you're drinking some apple cider, you can say, you know what, that completed in an odd way. Well, all right, so we did a few side quests here. What'd you get up to? Unfortunately, I'll say this already, I didn't really get up to all that much here because I didn't have that many things left undone. Chonk is a uncomplicated person, perhaps, but I bet you had several things going on. So what'd you get going, Michael?
Yeah, I had a couple of just sort of random side quests that I mopped up. One was, I don't even remember what the title was, but back when I went to Cottonwood Cove and had a big shootout with the Legion, there were some people who had been enslaved who were in like a pen there. And it was like a family. I think they had a name. Again, it's not terribly important. This was not a meaty quest. You could talk to them, and they would explain that it was a mother and her daughter and her son, and they'd been captured because they were traveling after the father either died or ran off, and they were looking for like a new place to live, and then they were captured by the Legion, and now they were going to become slaves. You could let them out, but they had explosive collars on, and if they left the pen, then they would die because their heads would explode. So I had to go search around the entirety of Cottonwood Cove on all of the corpses of the Legionnaires that I had killed to try to find the one who had the key to their collars, which I eventually did. And then they were like, geez, thanks. And then they left. And that was the end of that quest. Makes you feel good because you freed these people. And it was interesting, the little bit of, I guess, texture that you could get out of the world of the idea that, these were just people who essentially, were like working as scavengers or farmers or something. And then their lives got upended in a very specific way through, the absence of the father. And then, something horrible happened. Anyway, that happened. Then Alice Mclafferty, who is the woman who is in charge of the Crimson Caravan offices, way back a million episodes ago when I'd been talking with her about something else, she'd asked me to look into a bottle cap press that she thought was operating somewhere in the wasteland because people were making counterfeit bottle caps and, disrupting the economy, made it hard to trade. And she suspected that it was probably in the remains of the old Sunset Sarsaparilla factory. And so I headed over there and I found the bottle cap press in the back room and disabled it. And then went back to Mclafferty and told her about it, and she gave me some money or whatever. But the other interesting thing about Sunset Sarsaparilla, you didn't go here at all, did you?
No, I did not. I did walk by it one time,
Mm-hmm.
but I did not go in.
So there is a robot in the lobby named Festus. He is a cowboy robot, like a cowboy puppet robot. And he's like sort of dilapidated, like one eye is falling out. He's just kind of like hanging in. He only exists from like the waist up. He's like a the like fortune telling machines that you'll see at like a carnival or at the boardwalk, where it's like an animatronic like fortune teller lady or something in like a glass booth.
Sure. Yeah, like in the film Big.
Yes, exactly. This is basically one of those, but with a robot cowboy inside. And there's a lot of dialogue with Festus. He's very creepy looking, very eerie. It's interesting to see him actually, because he is, largely speaking, I would say that the visuals of this game, it's not that they've aged poorly, but it's kind of what happens to graphics and sort of graphics capabilities, right? This game is a decade old now and looks it, especially when it's trying to like render human faces and human expressions. Festus is stylized. He's straight up like a cartoon cowboy robot, and therefore the graphics on him, the effect comes off a little better, right? He looks more cutting edge precisely because he's stylized in this way, and he's just creepy looking. It's kind of weird. You can do all sorts of stuff with him. He will, if you press him on it, he mentions that there was like a health advisory put out about Sunset Sarsaparilla. He talks to you like a automated bank teller when you call them on the phone, and they're like, if you know your party's extension, say extension. Right? That's how he talks. So he's like, if you would like to hear the health advisory, like, say advisory. And I think you have to say it multiple times, because the first 3 times you do it, he'll be like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Like, he will refuse to tell you the health advisory. And then eventually he does. And it's more Mad Magazine stuff. Like, oh, if you drink too much sarsaparilla, you're gonna, like, I don't know, have an organ failure or something. This is also the guy who talks about, or he'll talk about the bottle caps mission, where you have to find like the 50 bottle caps with the stars on them and collect them all, and so on and so forth. Mostly, I didn't complete that quest, but mostly I just wanted to talk about Festus because he's here and a lot of work has been put into him. You can play blackjack with him. He has his own like sort of house rules version of blackjack, and he calls it Lucky Horseshoes. And the way it's different is that if you tie, like, the person who held automatically gets a point added to their score or something. So you can be sitting pretty, and then if the other person draws just right, then your score goes up and you don't have 21 anymore, you have 22. So anyway, lots of work got put into Festus, and I figured I would talk about him.
Yeah, I've heard the name before. I always assumed it was like a companion that I never knew about, but obviously not.
I wish he were a companion. Another weird thing I found out about, or I think got implied through this, I was of course hacking like terminals in the Sarsaparilla headquarters. You find out that they started automating their workforce. So that theme comes up again. And someone in these email chains says like, oh man, I was sort of uncertain about bringing in this robot, but now it's running our entire, supply line for the Western Division or whatever. And it's sort of implied that Festus is the robot who is doing this, I think, which is wild.
He's hyper competent.
Yeah. So I did that. And then I went out and met Colonel Daughtry at Camp McCarran, and I did some quests that I think you've already done. I met that guy with the golf club, for instance. He had me take out a bunch of fiends, of like gang members who were doing this, that, and the other. So I took them out, and it was just, fighting stuff. It was fine. And then I did some companion quests. I can pause here if you had other things that you wanted to talk about, and then I can talk about companion quests.
The only thing I want to interject here, or say in addition, is that it's quite interesting to me. I don't think I said it last time, but when I was doing the Brotherhood of Steel quests, I wholly randomly, I really was not looking for this character. I found, I think her name is Victoria. Is that her name? The Brotherhood of Steel.
Veronica.
Veronica. Found Veronica, and she's like running around doing all this stuff, right? And she's like, "Hey, I'm like out and about," and she's very cryptic when you talk to her. And I eventually, like after she said enough things, because she's basically saying like, "I'm from a place where not many people know where we live," and all this stuff. And eventually, you find out, like, yeah, you are. You know, if you know what she's saying, you're like, oh, you know, you're a Brotherhood of Steel person, and you can say that to her. You can be like, hey, I know about the Brotherhood of Steel. Like, you don't. I'm working for you. All this stuff. But what was really funny is because if you remember last time, I was doing quests for the Brotherhood of Steel, but they also hated me. And those two things were both true at the same time. And very funny, she joined me. And I was like, cool, she'll be like running around with me. And it's like a Brotherhood of Steel person hanging out with me. And then on the other, as soon as she joined me, she pulled my attention back again and spoke to me and was like, I can't believe, or she was like, obviously you don't want to spend time with me because you hate the Brotherhood of Steel. And then she left my party. So that's the one companion I had for about, I don't know, an eighth of a second. During last episode. But I did not do any companion quests. I had already done my one companion quest to fix my dog. And he was with me all the way to the end. But it sounds like you got up to some shenanigans.
Yeah. So I mentioned before that I've been trying to get Boone to open up with me. And somehow, by God, it's actually not somehow. What happened was I went back to Cottonwood Cove and I found the one legionary who I had not killed. And I killed him. And that was when Boone decided he liked me, because that's one of his conditions. Like, you can raise your standing with Boone by clearing out Cottonwood Cove. And it turns out I just had not killed like one scout who was standing off in the corner of the map. So when I went back and I freed those people from that slave pen, Boone, you know, his opinion of me went up. And then I talked to him about his past. Of course, we already know that Boone was in the NCR military. He was a sniper with the Rangers, all that stuff. And he was a part of the operation at Bitter Springs, which came up, it's come up a couple of times, but it's most relevant when we were talking with the Khans, because this is in-universe, like, it's the Khans version of, like, the Wounded Knee Massacre, where the NCR had the Khans pinned down, and they tried to, the Khans, that is, tried to evacuate their women, their elderly, their sick, and the children. And the NCR forces saw the evacuation and opened fire and killed all or most of them. Again, like, that is, you know, straight up a thing that the U.S. military has done to indigenous groups, and sort of the thing that it tries to, I think it's evoking most strongly there, is the Wounded Knee Massacre. And it turns out Boone was a part of that. He was one of the people who opened fire. And he explains how he feels really bad about that. He does not think he should have done that, but also it's a thing that happened, and he's sort of living with the guilt throughout, like, for the rest of his life, right? He feels like, basically, this is a thing that I've done, and it is just a matter of time until the universe essentially gets me back for this great evil that I have caused. And I just want to quote here some of the things that Boone says.
Like, does he mean that cosmically or pragmatically?
Let me quote.
Got it.
Here's what Boone says. Life has a way of punishing you for the mistakes you make. Big enough mistake, and punishment can take a while. Mine's not over. And to this, Lucky Nell is listening, and she says, well, life doesn't work that way. Your misfortunes are just bad luck, because everything's luck for Nell. And Boone responds, that's what they tell you in the casinos, too. Because it's the only way to get you to buy back in. If people knew the truth, that something's watching you, waiting to take it all away from you, and it never loses. That's all it's doing now, waiting for me to buy back in. So a little bit of anti-casino talk, which I'm not crazy about as Lucky Nell, but I'm going to allow it because I guess the unstated rules for Lucky Nell. I'll say these now. Rule number one: um, casinos and gambling and luck, etc. Rule number
Mhm.
two: friends, even if it seems to conflict with the first one. So we're going to be friends with Boone. And I ask him then, how do you know your punishment isn't over? And Boone responds, because I'm still alive. So
Jesus.
yeah, like his wife getting sold into slavery and all that, like he understands that as punishment for what he did at Bitter Springs. And he's basically like, this is like my life is going to be nothing but misfortune happening to me until I die. And so I say, well, maybe we should go back to Bitter Springs and kind of, revisit it and, see if we can lay something to rest for you. He's like, no, I don't want to do that. So then the dialogue closes and I walk 5 feet away. And then, much like Veronica did for you, the camera gets locked in and like spins me back around and pulls me into conversation with Boone. And he says, you know what? Let's go back to Bitter Springs. I've been giving it some thought, so I want to go back there. And so we do. And it's kind of an interesting little area because as you go up, it's sort of up in sort of the northeast of the map. And as you like walk up a hill and you can see kind of like the layering of assets of people who have been there because there's like a bunch of old contents. But then around those are trailers and little pop-up buildings put up by the NCR because the NCR currently is occupying this area, them with a bunch of like refugees essentially. And so you walk up through this area and then your objective changes to like it's something called like the Coyote Head Trail or something. So you keep walking through Bitter Springs and you hit like this kind of canyon and you come around a bend in the canyon and then you see all of the graves where presumably the cons who were killed here were buried because it's a canyon and it's just a line of graves on either side of you with grave markers and everything. And you walk down through that and you come up on kind of this little ridge and Boone has his kind of moment where he's like, well, like I came back here. I'm not really sure what I thought it would do, but I'm here and nothing terrible has happened. But it's given me something to think about. I think I'd like it if we would camp here for the night. And I'm like, sure, that's fine. So we camp there for the night. Like the screen fades out and comes back in. And then actually no, I think it's before the camp. It's after, before we make camp, he tells me his story, which is he runs through like what it was like to be on sort of his end of this, how they were all told that like his unit's orders were that the cons were going to try to escape through the canyon, and it was their job then to shoot them as like to take them down as they tried to flee. And he says that they were all in place, they were waiting for this to happen, and then when the cons started, like when the cons became visible, the people fleeing became visible, that was when they realized that it was the women and the children and the elderly. And he says that they tried to radio into command to figure like this doesn't seem right, like are we supposed to be doing this? And the way that he phrases it, I think this is interesting, is quote, command didn't get what we were seeing. So he sort of still is presenting this as like, no, like the administrators or the people in charge didn't understand what we were telling them, which I think would have been very clear, which is like, this is women and children. And then I said something like, I can't believe you would do that to innocent people. And Boone replies, with the cons, any one of them could be dangerous. You never know. And then he sort of trails off and he's like, but I think you might be right. And then that's when he, says he wants to camp there for the night. So we wake up after that and Boone's like, well, that happened. Wait a minute. My Legion sense is tingling. There's a bunch of Legion forces coming in. And lo and behold, there's like a little detachment of legionaries coming in to attack Bitter Springs. I'm like, why in the hell are they doing this? And Boone says, it's an easy pickings situation because they can just kill the few NCR officers that are here, and then they can take the refugees and make them slaves. So Boone and I fight off the Legion, and that makes Boone feel really happy. And he says, he's like, I thought I thought that was the end. Like, he was sort of planning on dying during that little siege, but he didn't. And I'm like, yeah, maybe, there's like, maybe what you do in the world is you learn from your mistakes and you try to do things better in the future. And he's like, yeah, maybe. And then because I, sort of talked him into a more, I don't know, understanding way of interfacing with the world, he got an armor upgrade. So that's Boone's quest.
That's what happens when you like confront the ghosts of the past, and you're like complicity in the murder of civilians.
Yep.
You get an armor upgrade.
Yeah. The other thing you can do here is you can tell him like, yeah, no, isn't it cool to kill the Legion? Like, let's go kill the Legion some more or whatever. And then he gets, like a damage upgrade or something.
Lord.
Yeah. Then I went back and I picked up Rose of Sharon Cassidy, who I mentioned many, many episodes ago. And I already did most of her companion quest, which you'll also recall was kind of like glitched out. But her situation was she's a trader from NCR. She her caravans are sort of like people she's working with keep getting ambushed and destroyed by people with energy weapons, and I found some pretty convincing evidence that Alice Mclafferty of Crimson Caravan, already mentioned in this episode, that she was working with the Van Graffs, the energy weapons purveyors in Freeside, in order to shut out Cass's caravan line. This quest was still kind of maybe glitched out. I'm not sure. I could go talk to Alice Mclafferty, and she wouldn't like the only objective in my Pip-Boy was, settle the score with Mclafferty. I could go and talk to her. She had nothing to say about this. Cass wouldn't say anything. I looked up a kind of walkthrough on the wiki, and apparently there is a point earlier on where I could have persuaded Cass to not want to kill Mclafferty, but somehow I have gotten into the position where that's the only way to complete this. Then, yeah, sure. You know what? Well, why not? So right there in the Crimson Caravan offices, I crouch down, I sneak. I'm very good at sneaking at this point. I walk into the corner and wait until everyone has forgotten that I'm there, and then I aim my gun at Mclafferty's head and blow it off. And NCR is not crazy about that. My reputation takes a hit, and people here start firing on me, but I run out of the building and run far enough away. And plus, at this, prior to this, NCR did kind of like me, so my reputation when it falls doesn't fall very far, so I can run away without them pursuing me. Gotta crack a few eggs to make some omelets, and in this case, you gotta, kill this woman because that's what Cass wants, I guess. Remember rule number 2, friends.
Yeah, I like that this is kind of an inverse Asimov's rules in the sense that it's like they exist, but who gives a shit how they interact with each other? And it's kind of like it's friends and then luck, So it's not an inverse maybe, but a Dickian rift or riff on very laissez-faire guy on meth kind of iteration of Asimov's rules, but for the Fallout universe, of course.
Yeah. So that happens. I have one other companion at this point who I haven't mentioned much of, although I did mention him back when I first noticed him, Arcade Gannon from the Followers of the Apocalypse. At the time, I didn't have a high enough speech skill to persuade him to come with me, but very shortly after that, I leveled up and he joined with me. And so I want Arcade's quest, but I don't really know him that well. It turns out he's like Boone. He's someone who needs to explore things with you and know things. So I have him join my party while I go, poke around some other things. some interesting stuff about Arcade, because I was talking with him, before we went out questing. I asked him about himself, and he insists that he's not very interesting, that you should, if you want interesting stories, go talk to a Freeside junkie or something. And he explains that he grew up west of here, is how he puts it. He's very vague. He says that he and his mother were kind of in it alone. His father died when he was very young, and they never got over it. They moved around a lot. He deflects a lot of your questions with like jokes or sort of asides and things like that. And at a certain point, you can ask him like, why do you always deflect? And he's like, oh, to obscure my association, or like my past association with a fascist paramilitary organization. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha, indeed. So anyway, Arcade and I are out poking around. I run to the Silver Rush in Freeside, where the Van Graffs were, the gun runners that were relevant to Cass's quest, because I want to grab stuff there and sell it for money. Arcade is extremely interested in this place. He like stops me and talks to me about all of these energy weapons. He's like, wow, look at all these energy weapons. There's just so many here. And I'm like, you seem to know a lot about these energy weapons, man. How do you know that? And he's like, oh, nothing. I don't know. Just a thing that I know. Okay. So I go out and I putter around a little bit more. I go to the RepCon offices, and he mentions, the same thing happens. Like after we're in there for a little bit, he's like, I know some stuff about, apparently RepCon was in some sort of competition with Poseidon Energy and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. How do you know all that? And he's just like, not a question I'm going to answer right now. So that's it. That's as much as I can do with Arcade right now. I just took him out and had some conversations with him. The other thing to note about Arcade is that he really hates the Legion. So one of the other things I did is I went down to the fort, and when you get there, he's like, what the hell are we doing here? He's like, am I playing Virgil to your Dante? Because Arcade reads books. And I'm like, no, I'm just here sussing things out. And he's like, okay, good, because I, don't like the Legion. But that's as far as I can get with Arcade at this point. So then I go back to check in on my other old friend, Yes Man. And he's still hanging out in the room behind Benny's bedroom. Benny's corpse is still on his bed. The Tops is not very good at cleaning up their rooms, I must say. And I explained to Yes Man that I've been having so many fun adventures. I've cleaned up so many things. I got the Boomers, for instance, to pledge their support to me. And Yes Man tells me, that's great. Now they will only blow up the right sorts of people. I told him he told me to look at the Brotherhood of Steel. And I said, you will recall in the previous episode, I left the Brotherhood of Steel alone because they annoyed me. And he's like, that's fine. Who cares about the Brotherhood of Steel? Who cares about the projections that suggest that they'll be our next biggest enemy? Who cares about that? But eventually, I run through kind of the list of all of the people that I've checked in on the Omertas and the White Glove Society and the Cons. And it turns out there's only one other thing that Yes Man had wanted me to look into, and that was whether or not I should kill Mr. House. And Eleanor, lucky now, she's a little conflicted about this, because where did all these fine casinos come from? Where did New Vegas come from? It came from Mr. House. That is very much the case. So she headed over to the Lucky 38 to have a conversation with Mr. House. And he also has some, additional bits of dialogue where I can update him on all of the things that have happened. For instance, first of all, I've talked to him. This is the first time I have talked to House since he last talked to me and sent me on his first mission, which is go to the fort and upgrade the Securitrons. So I've done that. He's happy about that. But then I can tell him, Caesar's dead, right? And he's like, yes, I know, but according to my calculations, the death of Caesar is really not going to change the effect of the upcoming battle for Hoover Dam at all. Like all of the forces are already too much in motion for Caesar's death to topple the Legion entirely. Right there's a structure, a command structure in the Legion. People are going to step into place, and they're still going to try to make their play for the forts or for the dam. So, whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. Did you know that the White Glove Society were cannibals? And he's like, oh yeah, no, but I made them sign a contract, so they wouldn't do that anymore. So he's fine with that. And then I ask, well, so let's say at the end of all this, what happens? Like after this big battle that you're foreseeing, the dust clears and you're still in charge of New Vegas. What are the next steps? And he's like, oh, well, like I'm really obviously the man suited for this job to put I can't remember exactly how he puts it, to put humanity back on track or something like that. No. How he wrote it? I am to remedy mankind's derailment. So he says that New Vegas itself, the economy is what he calls a blast furnace, and he will use this to build a new rail straight to a new horizon for humanity. NCR, he says, is a entire sort of society of people, of customers, people who are desperate for luxury, and he can offer that. So if he can maintain good relationship with the NCR while remaining independent, he can have this huge revenue stream. And then he says within 20 years, he expects to have high-tech sectors back in working development. In 50 years, he expects to have people in orbit around the Earth. And then he says, and then in 100 years, my colony ships will be heading for the stars to search for planets unpolluted by the wrath and folly of a bygone generation. And
Lord.
Yeah. And I say, oh, and so you'd be a dictator over all of this then. And he says, well, I prefer the term autocrat. I would run New Vegas as a CEO, but without, a board to answer to. I trust myself, right? I would not, he has a very high opinion of himself, obviously, but, he says, I have no time for democracies or something like that. If you want to know the fate of democracies, look out the windows. And then you can say or suggest that maybe he's like becoming megalomaniacal. And he's like, oh, if you think I'm going to become some sort of messianic machine god, don't worry, because I am impervious to such corrupting ambitions.
A messianic machine god?
Yes. Yeah. Well, okay, that's all well and good. Here is a thing that Mr. House did not talk about at all in his plans for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Casinos.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah. Like, what's all this colony ships putting people in orbit? Are they going to have, like, how do you run a roulette wheel if you're in low gravity? Answer me that, Robert. So Nell does not really like this kind of vision of the future. I mean, the autocrat, Mr. House, maybe that's not so great, but really, like, he's lost the plot.
I wish you could call him Robert consistently. I wish you could be like, I'm sorry, Robert. I'm not interested in taking over the Mojave Wasteland for you.
That would be very good. That would be
Robert Robo-Rob. You clown.
Robco, how genius. So yeah, I tell Mr. House, no, I don't tell Mr. House this. This is Lucky Nell's thinking. He's lost the plot. Like, everything he has, he owes to casinos and gambling and beautiful, beautiful luck. And there's just none of that going on here. Now, speaking of luck, it happens that way back when I was trying to find Fisto, I ended up in Mr. House's half-brother's factory, his robot factory that you mentioned in the previous episode, the one that has the special card that allows you to get into the back room behind Mr. House's like bedroom or whatever, like where his real body is being kept. So once Lucky Nell realized there were no casinos in the future, at least as far as House was explicitly planning, she bebops back there and she kills him. It's basically nothing in that scene really differs from what I think you would have experienced or had available to you. Although the one thing that I want to talk about that you didn't mention was his obituary.
Where did you see it?
Okay, so you wouldn't necessarily know that this is what it was. When you kill Mr. House, you automatically receive and then fail a quest called The House Has Gone Bust, and this puts a note in your inventory that is his obituary.
Oh, I did see this in my inventory, and I read through it, and I was really confused. I thought maybe I'd picked it up. I thought maybe it was referring to the brother. But I didn't read it very closely. I just saw that it happened because it kept referring to... Anyway, that makes a lot of sense. That is his obituary.
Yeah, so it's his obituary, and it talks about he was 261 years old. He was the sole proprietor of the New Vegas Strip, industrialist and technologist, founder, president, and CEO of the multi-billion-dollar pre-war robotics and software corporation. Very much all about himself and how great he was, and how that now that he's died, lost forever is his bounty of knowledge concerning human longevity, the depth and breadth of which could, as he was apt to say, quote, fill several textbooks. Also lost forever are House's singular personality, force of will, vision, leadership ability. We get his whole biography. He was born on June 25th, 2020. Orphaned at an early age when his parents died in a freak accident, autogyro, lightning, that's in the parentheses. Though cheated of his inheritance, House attended the prestigious Institute in Massachusetts and founded Robco Industries on his 22nd birthday. Then, by 2065, he knew about the war. He talks about how he came back out of hibernation and reformed the families. And then at the end, we'll revise and finish this up later. Have set the age at death to update automatically. Obit makes salient points, but pearls before swine, of course. Let's hope the ingrates never have cause to read it. Who knows how many of them are even literate. So,
Lord.
Yep. That's his... That's Mr. House's self-written obituary. But he's dead. And so I run back to Yes Man, and I'm like, listen, Yes Man, we need to make some casinos. And he's like, yes, I agree, because that's what he does. So the next step is to install him on Mr. House's computer system. So he meets me over at the Lucky 38. He takes the platinum chip, and Yes Man uploads himself to Mr. House's computer system. So that big screen where you see Mr. House, like that picture of him projected, it just becomes Yes Man's big smiling face. And yep, and that's kind of where this, for me, transitions into the next quest, which I know that you have also done.
Yeah, I can talk about a couple little side quests here real quick, I guess, before we jump into that.
Mm-hmm.
You remember Camp Forlorn Hope?
Yeah.
I went back there.
Mm-hmm.
It's Camp Hopeful now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, so
Did they change the name?
No, they didn't. Wouldn't that be good?
It would be very funny.
We're hopeful now. This is Camp Hopeful. No, but so I went back and, I'd already done half the quests there in order to get to the place where I needed to be for what we were doing that last time. And basically the only thing that was left for me there were two quests. One was go and help the doctor. I went to the doctor and I said, hey, I'm here to help. And he said, well, do you have any experience being a doctor? And I said, no, I don't. I have no experience. And they said, all right, well, take this note back to the commander and tell him that you didn't do any doctoring. and I did. And then the commander said, oh, that's unfortunate that you're not a doctor. Anyway, here's the next quest. So it was bizarre and how that worked out. And then, then I went to... the last thing for it is they had recently lost the local town of Nelson. And so I went over to Nelson, and it was full of the Legion, and I clonked them in the head with a golf club over and over again. And then we won.
Hooray.
And now it's Camp Hopeful again. So I did that. I also went all the way back to the beginning of the game and did the side quest where you need to clear out the road between Mojave Outpost and Prim. It's a bunch of ants there, by the way. Based on the fact that I'm vilified by the Legion, it is also full of Legion assassins.
Ah, my old friends.
They're way harder to kill than ants. Like, way harder to kill than ants. And so I had a little bit of a hard time taking them down. But I did that and cleared out those ants and went back to the Mojave Outpost and, made sure that everything's good in that part of the town. So I did those, and that was kind of the only small little side quests I had left going. The other one that was kind of in my... I got some other quests that were given to me, breadcrumbed. Vault 22 as a quest was given to me, and same feeling that you did. There's a bunch of plants in there. I don't want to deal with that. So didn't do that. And then the Crimson Caravan quest that you've talked about, both this one that you talked about and the ones that you talked about in the previous episode, I was breadcrumbed there as well. So, and I did not do it.
Okay.
But yeah, that's where I was at. And then I got into the kind of into the game stuff. But what was the quest that you are talking about?
Well, so Yes Man is installed into the computer system. He then upgrades double checks all the Securitrons have been upgraded. That's fantastic. And he's like, all right, so two things need to happen now, or like two things potentially can happen, but one is very critical for us. One is that we need to boost our transmission power. So if you take this particular cool little module that Mr. House designed and you take it to the Eldorado substation down between like Novak and the Strip, very near where those ants are, actually, I think. If you go down there and hook this up, then we will be able to kickstart the reactor here in the Lucky 38, which, by the way, did you know, says Yes Man, the Lucky 38 has its own reactor. So we just need to, kickstart it to get it online. And this will help a lot. If you do that, while you are doing that, that will allow me to, power more Securitrons, I guess. But also the other thing that's happening is that President Kimball from the NCR is coming to visit, and Mr. House has calculated that he's like 87% likely to be assassinated. It is very important, says Yes Man, according to Mr. House's notes, that President Kimball not be assassinated because he needs to get out of here. So when things go bad in the Mojave, people will blame him. Right, the NCR will need someone to pin the failure on. But if he dies in New Vegas or in the Mojave Wasteland, then New Vegas itself might end up catching the blame, and that would be bad for tourist revenue and stuff, because we want NCR people to keep coming. So the critical thing that Yes Man wants you to do, is to power up this substation, and then sort of the optional goal is go stop Kimball from being assassinated. And just to sort of see what happened, I went and did the substation first, and when you do this, Kimball gets assassinated off screen and you automatically fail protecting him. So I wanted us to have a stronger point of comparison for this mission, so I reloaded the save and I went to check out Kimball's situation before I went to the substation.
Gotcha. That is interesting that is the way it kind of routes other routes in the game through this thing.
Yeah, it's really weird because no one has told, apart from Yes Man, no one tells me, in my playthrough, to go see about Kimball. But if I don't go to do that mission, if I just do the substation, then I fail the quest and I gain infamy with NCR. So somehow NCR is blaming me, despite the fact that nobody on Earth, aside from this robot, who only I know exists, have told me to do this thing.
My robot who no one knows exists except for me, and controls all of space and time in the in the strip. You know that guy. You know the robot. Yeah, you definitely sound like just a normal guy running around in the wasteland talking about your robot friend who controls everything. The way I get it is, the traditional through the NCR kind of thing, right? They say, hey, you need to go talk to, or just name down, Ranger Grant. Says, you need to go talk to Ranger Grant. Kimball's coming. And Ranger Grant says, yeah, look, Kimball's going to come. He's going to tour the whole zone here, and you need to make sure that goes off without a hitch. So, do a little investigating. The Legion's definitely going to try something. We know that they're all in the NCR and, infiltrating us and whatnot. So you need to go, make sure everything is cool. And I said, okay. And so I walked around a little bit. You do a little walkabout. And it's unclear where he's coming. Mm-hmm. It's unclear any of this. It's actually, I think the signaling here could be way, way better about just what the hell is happening. But basically, you have some kind of steps where you can say, I'm ready for Kimball to show up, and then it starts happening. But so I do this thing, and it's also kind of unclear about what is the space where you need to check things out. Mm-hmm. Is it the whole Hoover Dam? Because that's a lot of stuff. Or is it just this little local area? Where is Kimball actually coming from? Which will help. So really, really unclear to me in a broad sense about what's happening. But I walk around and I go into, there's a broom closet or something, a janitorial closet, something like that. And there's blood on the ground. And you can inspect the blood. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. And I think you get a hint that's hey, you should check out the engineers. And so I do walk around and I talk to the engineers, and I don't see any engineers that give me anything other than NPC it doesn't have a dialogue tree associated with it. I talked to this woman who's walking around, and she says, hey, have you seen my friend Engineer Bob? He's not around. Have you seen him? And I was like, okay, so Engineer Bob is been killed, infiltrated by the Legion, blah, 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 all this stuff. Easy. So I kind of look around for him a bit. I just don't find anyone. And so I thought, okay, well, if I know, my thought is I'll let Kimball come. And then when I see an engineer rolling up for no reason, I'll kill that guy, or confront him. Something like that. I go outside. The vertibird is coming. It's coming from way far off, and it's coming to land. I go and stand by it as it's landing. It lands right beside me. Mm-hmm. At about that moment, an engineer comes out and say, okay, this is the legionary guy. I don't see Kimball. Kimball has not spawned out of the helicopter or anything like that. So I go up to the engineer and I talk to him, and he says, oh, for the Legion. And then his head explodes.
Uh-huh.
So I'm thinking, oh, they beefed it. Whoops, they messed this up. Assassination, good to go. Assassination failed. We are good to go. Hey, everyone wins. So I, at that moment when I'm okay, guess things are good to go, Kimball spawns in, that fade in spawn, you're coming through a doorway, mm-hmm. that kind of thing. Fade in spawn, he's already crouched with his head on his head, his hands on his head, kind of crouched down on the ground. You know how they the panicking civilian kind of pose? He's in that. He fades in and then fades immediately back out again. The vertibird takes off and flies away. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess is this a success? What happened? And basically they're oh, I went and talked to Ranger Grant again, and Ranger Grant's bummer that happened, but Kimball didn't die. So it's all a win in everyone's book. And so so it took literally 4 minutes or something, 4 or 5 minutes for this whole, which seems like it's being positioned to you as a big and cool and impressive quest, Kimball's coming. You're going to have to probably protect him from the Legion. And that's what I'm preparing for. But nope, I just kind of watched him phase in and out like a ghost and then fly away. The animation time for the vertibird was 10 times longer than the actual amount of time that Kimball was on the ground.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't really know if that worked correctly or if there was some weird scripting errors going on there, but it counted as a neutral to positive quest. I didn't fail the quest, so I'll take that as a win.
Great. So how this goes for me is I'm leaving Lucky 38, and then Arcade stops me, and he's like, "Hey, you know what? You're kind of getting into the middle of a big thing here. Like, things are really in motion now that really we're, there's presidents and stuff. So I need to come clean with you. I think I could help out with this coming battle, but the thing is, I am kind of technically sort of used to be a part of the Enclave." By which he means his father was an Enclave soldier at Navarro, and he was a child when the Chosen One blew up the oil rig back in Fallout 2. And he explains that, he grew up in, sort of Enclave society. But then after the Enclave fell, he and his mother only had kind of their remaining kind of Enclave friends to fall back on, and the NCR, having annexed that region, was going through and purging Enclave remnants, and so they were kind of constantly on the run, and it was him and his mother with his father's old unit. And he has kept tabs on a lot of these people, and they're all eventually, right, they have all had to flee to the Mojave because the NCR was enclosing all of what used to be California. So they've all kind of ended up here. And as he really appreciated all of these adults around him. And then as he grew up, he joined the followers of the Apocalypse because they encouraged his learning and so on and so forth. But he's kept in charge with his father's old unit. And he would like us, if we think it would be helpful, to go talk with all of them and see if they would be willing to join the fight at Hoover Dam. So, of course, yes, he tells me who they all are and where they all are, and I zip around the map. One of them is this old woman named Daisy, who is in the motel at Novak. I think I maybe even mentioned her back when I was first in that area, because she mentions, she openly tells you she was a vertibird pilot for the Enclave. And so you show up and you say hey, Arcade told me to find you. Do you want to help us out during this, big battle that's going to come up about the Hoover Dam? And she's like, sure, for Arcade, anything. And then we leave. And this sets up a sort of pattern. You go and you meet a person, you talk with them, you learn a little bit about their life when they were working for the Enclave. And then Arcade talks to you about them. It gets into some iffy territory here because it's things like, in this case, right, Arcade saying well, Daisy really didn't care about the Enclave's ideals. She just liked being a pilot. So all of the bad things that the Enclave was doing, like the forced abductions and the eugenics and the genocide, all that is just kind of it wasn't important to Daisy because she just liked flying. The other guy, well, there's a couple of, the rest of them are all guys, actually. So then there's, the next guy is named Judah Krieger. You find him in West Side. He is an old man sitting playing chess with another old man outside of a store there. He was the former commander. And he's like, yep, sure, I'll join up with you. The next guy is named Orion Moreno. He lives outside of the NCR sharecropper place. He's in one of the houses out there, and he's very, very grouchy, very mean. Arcade tells you basically he's the one true Enclave diehard out of all these people. He was the one who believed in the Enclave as an idea and genuinely thought that the Enclave was a continuation of the American government. And he says, Arcade says, he remembers fleeing Navarro, or fleeing the tanker, I guess, or the oil the oil platform and watching it explode. And this guy saying to Arcade, little baby Arcade, kiss America goodbye, boys, or something.
What? They're fascists.
Yeah.
Though.
Yeah.
Well, oh, wow, a true believer.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
The next guy is named Cannibal Johnson. He's living in a cave north of a train yard.
Yeah, hell yeah.
You go into his cave and it's like he's like got a whole bunch of like old like review show posters that he has hanging up on the walls, and he has like, you know, little fairy lights and stuff. He's like super friendly, and you can ask him like, are you really a cannibal? And he's like, well, once I tore out a raider's heart and took a bite out of it, but that was just to scare his buddies. All of my friends were weirded out too, but that's where the name comes from. And he, you know, also agrees to help out. And Arcade tells you that of all the people in this unit, Cannibal Johnson was the one who didn't belong in the Enclave, because he was constantly like subverting orders and trying to get around like what his commanding officers were telling him to do and stuff. And it's only because Judah Krieger was such a good commander that he kept Cannibal Johnson and Orion Moreno from killing each other. The last guy is Dr. Henry in Jacobstown, whom you would have met because he would have helped out with your dog. He's the guy who's also trying to cure the Nightkin schizophrenia. So
that makes a lot of sense that this is an Enclave guy.
So
he's got that vibe.
I head up to Jacobstown, and then I do all the stuff that you can do at Jacobstown. I meet Lily, and I do her quest. So she's part of my party now, but I don't have to talk about it because you've already done that. And then I also then talk to Dr. Henry, and I'm like, hey, you want to come do Enclave Remnant stuff with us? And he's like, sure. So then Arcade tells me where to find their secret bunker, which is kind of out sort of south of Jacobstown. So I go down there, and it's just like a sort of hidden door beneath a rock. You go down, and it's like old Enclave architecture like we saw at the end of Fallout 3 and Raven Rock. It's like, you know, dustier and more dilapidated. You go down there, and there's like a vertibird and a hangar, and there's all this power armor kept in, you know, like containment fields. And you walk into a room, and there's all these old Enclave members standing around their little war table. And you start the conversation, and they're like, yeah, so Arcade has asked us to all like come together and see if we'll like fight with the Hoover Dam, or fight for the Hoover Dam. But doesn't that mean we'll be fighting for the NCR, which is, you know, kind of a problem given the NCR like Enclave history. And no one really cares about this except for Moreno, the diehard. And he like runs out of the room. And they're like, oh shit, can you go talk to him and see if you can like bring him on board? Like, if not, you know, we'll still help you, but like, you know, we are a unit, we're a team, and we would like to have him. So I leave the room, and he's out there. He's already put on his power armor. He has his minigun up, and he is getting ready to murder me. And he's like, I can't believe you were going to have me, you know, fight with the NCR, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, and this is the other weird thing, is that I'm not fighting for the NCR, but I can't tell anyone that I'm doing this independently. It all has to be sort of articulated for people as NCR versus Legion, right? I can't be like, no, you're working for me, which is to say you're working for Vegas. But anyway, I explained to Moreno that actually what's going to happen is he and all of his Enclave buddies are going to show up, and they're going to show the NCR how it's really done. And isn't that going to rub it in their face that a bunch of old like Enclave remnants showed up and outperformed them? And this succeeds immediately. He's like, dang it. All right, I guess I'll help. Then Arcade is like, gosh, I can't believe you've done all this. How fantastic. Man, I really don't know whether I should, you know, suit up and go fight with them, or if I should, you know, go back to the fort in Freeside and, you know, do the Followers of the Apocalypse thing, right? Be a doctor. And I say, well, you know, you would probably be, well, I've fought some things with Arcade. He's not great at it. So I say, Arcade, you should go back to the old Mormon fort and be a doctor. Like, that's what you should be doing during this coming battle. And he's like, man, okay. Like, that's a, you know, I thought that you were going to be, you were talking more about like loyalty to the past when we were meeting all of the remnants. What changed? And I'm like, that's not your past, basically, right? Like, you were a literal child. Like, they're doing something that's different from what you're doing. You can still, you kind of have your own future to make here. He's like, all right, cool. So the Enclave remnants teach me how to use power armor. They give me a set of power armor because Daisy, the pilot, isn't going to use it. And then I try to leave the bunker, and Arcade shows up again, and he's like, hey, here's my dad's old power armor. I'm not going to use it, obviously, because you told me to go be a doctor, but maybe you'll find it interesting. So, okay, yeah, whatever. I've got all this power armor, and now I've got some Enclave remnants scheduled to help me. Time to figure out what I'm going to do about, the assassination attempt. I go over to the dam. The NCR is not on good terms with me on account of me having killed Mclafferty, but that doesn't mean that they're auto-hostile. It just means that they don't tolerate my bullshit. So there are multiple points where I'm trying to just walk around Hoover Dam and everyone auto-hostiles me and starts killing me because I stepped into a place that the NPCs don't want me to be, which is very fun, quote unquote. Eventually, I figure out that I'm supposed to go inside and talk to, the General Chief, whatever the heck, Grant. And all of the same stuff that happened for you happened for me. This quest is very strange in that it feels like there was like maybe more planned here, maybe sketched out than actually got implemented. Just because you can do all this stuff like finding the blood in that little room. But then if you try to do anything with the engineers, they won't talk to you. You can try to pickpocket them and check their inventory. There's nothing there. You can't do anything about this stuff until you go out and you talk to the NCR guy, and it sort of initiates Kimball landing. So Kimball lands. He comes out to do his speech. He like walks around and he comes up to like the front of there's like a little podium that he's standing at in front of this little crowd of soldiers. And he's here to give a medal to a guy did you talk to the guy he's giving a medal to?
No.
Oh, I can't remember his name, but you can like talk to him in the crowd before. And he's just like, hey, yo, like he's like sort of a down home, good old boy. And he's like, my mama was a prospector, and one day she left me with a farmer when she went out prospecting and didn't come home anymore. And then the farmer made me leave. So I was on my own for a while, but then the NCR found me and blah, 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 blah. And it's like he had nothing else. And then the army scooped him up, very sad. But he's here to get a medal. And Kimball is going to deliver it. I see that engineer that you mentioned walk out, so I run up behind him and I pickpocket him, and he has a detonation device in his inventory. So he's like set up a bomb somewhere. So I grab that and I run back and I hand it over to the Grant.
Grant.
Yeah, I hand it over to
Ranger
him.
Grant.
Hand it over to Ranger Grant, and he's like, good work. We'll take care of this guy right away. So then 2 NCR troops come out, and they walk up behind this engineer, and the second he realizes that people have caught on, he pulls out a knife and starts slashing and everything, and screaming, fights break out. Everyone's pulling their guns. Kimball ducks down and comes running around the crowd, running back up to his vertibird, and this is when Nell reflects very briefly on the whole speech that she just heard about, that Kimball was giving about how, the bravery of our troops, and how, many have said that this is like a pointless conflict and blah, 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 but they don't realize that as long as an NCR citizen is standing somewhere that is NCR territory, nothing about casinos. Nothing at all about the beautiful, beautiful casinos that are here in the Mojave. And, well, the other thing is, there are 3 factions. The Legion, Mr. House, and the NCR. Nell has already killed the leader of the Legion, killed Mr. House. It would kind of be unfair to the NCR to not try to kill their leader. And of course,
well, yeah, it would be stacking the deck in their favor.
Yes, exactly. And of course, Mr. House, has all his projections where he's like, no, if we let Kimball survive and go back, then he'll be the scapegoat and they won't blame New Vegas. And, Mr. House ran a lot of projections. Mr. House made a lot of bets. And one of the bets he made was that Lucky Nell was not going to kill him. And that turned out to be really wrong. So I whip out my gun and I empty my clip into President Kimball's head.
Uh-oh.
Yep. even things out, put everyone on some kind of equal ground. No one else sees this the way that I do. They all start shooting at me. Luckily, I can put on that power armor that I have because it absorbs quite a bit of damage. And then I have also scrounged up some stealth boys. So I use one of those and I sneak off. As I sneak off, my reputation with the NCR goes down to, let me pull this up, something called Smiling Devil. The description for this.
What?
Most people say you're the devil himself, but most admit you've also done a world of good.
Lord.
So I am now vilified, basically, right? Like, this is an auto-hostile reputation. I discover this as I escape and I run over. Remember, I have another objective here, which is to go over to the Eldorado power station. I get hit by a Legion Assassin squad while I'm doing that, and I take them out, and then I go up to the power station, which is surrounded by a little NCR detachment. And the second they see me, they start shooting. So I have to sneak around them and then, shoot a bunch of them, and then I get into the power station and I install Yes Man's override module, head back to the Lucky 38, and he's like, fantastic news. We can now control. Like, you started the Lucky 38's reactor. I can now control Securitrons not only on the strip, but outside of the strip, right? My transmission range is broader. Isn't that great? Too bad about President Kimball, though. And that's kind of where we leave off. We've kind of put everything into Endgame.
Weird. This is a really weird question. Or a small question, but one I care about. Is the power armor that you got from the Enclave, is it Enclave power armor?
Yes.
Oh, it's got that weird bug hat and everything?
Yep.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to point out, Mr. House made a lot of bad calls, as I've already said. But here's something from his obituary that I did not read before. Generally recognized by Mr. House to be mankind's only hope of long-term survival, Mr. House's passing may well sound a death knell for the entire human race.
Lord. For the whole human race?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
And so, Lucky Nell may have transformed a little bit into Death Knell here, but I don't know if she has the power to take out the whole human race.
You gotta hope not. But we'll find out. That's going to be in next episode.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to twitter.com/rangetouch in order to see everything that we're up to. You can go to patreon.com/rangetouch in order to support the show. If you want to listen to this as a podcast and you're not already listening to it as a podcast, you can go to patreon.com/rangetouch and support us for $3 a month and get access to a little podcast feed. Help you out. Make your life better. Maybe. I'm getting choked up about it. Getting emotional about it. We'll be back in 2 weeks with the final episode of New Vegas. Not the last episode of talking about New Vegas, of course, but we'll be covering the end of the game, and then we'll do one episode per DLC. There are 4 DLCs, so we got a few episodes to go. But this will be our... this next episode is going to be the one where we're covering the end of the game, and we'll talk about those beautiful Fallout slideshows that everybody loves.
So until next time, remember that war never changes, but the slideshows don't. Or they probably do. They probably changed it for 4. Whatever.